episode of a new jazz podcast where I know nothing of what I'm doing. But luckily for me, my first guest is a broadcaster of note, so I'm guessing he's kind of gonna help me deal with the ropes. So I don't know how to introduce you because I've read a lot in the last few weeks, and there's no consistency. There's a lot. At some point, I saw promoter. At some point, I saw writer. At some point, I saw jazz student. I think rather let's have you introduce yourself.
I think for me, okay, maybe let's talk about who your sources are. Because everybody knows me for something, but I'm a bit of everything else. I think, and versatility is something that we'll get into a bit later in the conversation, because that requires you to be able to, fit in into different spaces and become different things, when required. But for me personally, I am a communicator, I am a broadcaster, I am a jazz disciple, I am a collector, yeah, and a curator as well, if that's the word to use, in this instance. But yeah, all of the above and more, I think.
Let's go back to Netherlands.
Right.
We're gonna go back to Netherlands, and before we even speak to Netherlands as Ngwako in Netherlands, I'd like to speak of a relationship which we often may overlook as being one critical in everyone's life. I'd like to speak of the relation between a grandparent and a grandchild before we even equate it to Ngwako and his grandparents.
Sure. I belong to a school of, having been born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, Soweto, and a lot of us were raised by our grandparents, and it's not exclusive to Soweto. A lot of, neighborhoods, Gastingata in South Africa, they kind of have that story, a backstory, where a lot of us, many of us, were raised by our grandparents because our parents had to work, and back in those days, either you were a teacher or you were a nurse, or and if you weren't the above, then your hustle was different. You'd never stay home. You'd move to the city, and your children would be raised by either both your parents or your mom, or paternal, maternal, whatever the situation was during the time. So of course we used to cling to our grandparents. I mean, they played the role of mom and dad in some instances, where you found that, some moms are single parents and they don't have their partners who were there initially, but, have since found other partners to be there for them, So our grandparents they played a huge role. They're the ones that kind of showed us the ropes. Of course, that also came with a sense of street cred, because when you're raised by the elders, your wisdom, is unmatched. You know everything about everything because they've lived, they've been doing, and they're still doing whilst they're raising you as a grandchild. So there was that experience was very, very. I think it's bewildering when I think about it, because I wouldn't know as much as I know now had it not been for that phase in my life, which I'm forever grateful for. And at the same time, I did not lose touch with my parents, because they would then, be around over the weekends and whatever. And whenever school holiday periods came around, and then I'd come and live with them in the city, of course, just to kind of experience that, and they would kind of, have me being part of the hustle and bustle, whether it's just being at home, witnessing the comings and the goings, with my siblings, of course, or we'd have to, visit cousins who also had the similar experience, and then we'd then have to have that kind of background. But I'd always go back to my grandparents, and that's exactly who I've always identified as my parents, because they were the were the first, guardians before my real parents. Yeah. So it's a very special relationship, definitely.
So it's the typical 80s and 90s kids calling the grandparents dad and mom.
Yeah. And then you call your mom with a real name because, hey, she's your sister, right?
Yeah.
And then many years later, they're like, no, actually, this is your mom. And like, Mara, wait, John, what do you mean? But yeah, it's pretty special, and it still is. I still have my grandmother. She's officially 86 years. She's amazing. She's really amazing. She's level-headed. She listens to me every Sunday.
Mm.
And some of the conversations that I kind of stumble upon, especially around old music, are some that I've had with her. She's got this nice radio in the kitchen that she sits and she listens to on Sundays. And whenever I'm done with the show, depending on what's happening in my personal space, I'd leave the station, I'd leave the studio, and I'd go straight to her house, and we sit and we talk about the music on the show. And she's like, I liked that. I really enjoyed that. And she'd even critique what I sounded like. And she's like, no, she's like, so we've got that thing. And a lot of the music that I bring onto the show, stuff that I heard while I was sitting in the kitchen with her, and I kind of sit there and like, oh, that's a nice something to share. That's a nice something to share. And she kind of creates the setting for me to create the show. Yeah.
And this is something you grew up around. This is an environment you grew up.
Absolutely. This is what we did back in the day. I mean, when my grandfather was still alive, he was an avid collector of jazz vinyls. Back in the day, if you didn't have a vinyl player, your sound was whack. So of course, if you were a jazz collector, you had to collect jazz from Johannesburg City, Market Street, Kohino, brother. And I used to take those trips with him, especially on Saturdays. And Ngatamaga Patco, I remember. It was a blue Patco, and then it became a white one, but it was the blue Patco predominantly because it was in Soweto at the time, And we drive into the city, and he'd run his errands, and of course by the afternoon he'd be done, and we'd go to Kohino, and we'd hang out with the owner of the store, and they'd argue over jazz, and they'd argue over the latest records, and and I distinctly remember the scent of Kohino. It was a smoky book smell, a new book kind of smell, but with a smoky accent in it. So it was that kind of thing. And I'd sit in the corner, they'd play, the speakers, the radio would play, and there'd be one jazz song after another. And of course, after that, he'd buy like 5 or 6 records, they used to call them during the time. And we'd then, come home and he'd play it all over again, and this is literally way into the night around 1 a.m. and we'd sleep. And of course, Sunday would show up and he'd do it all over again. So that was then the institution of jazz being instilled in me. And I think I was in primary school then, I was in my 10th year or, 11 years old. It was that then, that was jazz. That was, of course, every other thing was being celebrated in the home. International music was big on the radio, because that's all we knew. That's what the post-apartheid days then. R&B was a big thing, and it was a big thing purely because we didn't have it on the TV. The only one channel that was there was Bob TV, and Bob TV used to kind of broadcast from a certain time in the morning to a certain time at night. So possibly around, I stand corrected, but possibly around like 9 a.m. they'd start their normal broadcasting, and it will end around 10 p.m. when the last movie ends. And the filler was the latest hip hop and R&B from America.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. So, of course, music was big, and people gravitated towards. I mean, we learned about Buckshot LeFunk, Nas, we learned about, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg through that specific platform. And of course, then it started to filter into the mainstream South African scene, which was the radio, and then it became, R&B, and R&B then kind of took over and became the next big thing, and people kind of started gravitating towards R&B as the only thing that's music that's relatable, especially to that kind of generation. And then, of course, jazz took a backseat to music for the old people, as Kwaito happened, as house happened, as so consistently it was almost a transition of thinking, especially when the radio stations that made it cool started to make Kwaito and house cool, and then the artists started to become cool because now they had a whole brand to kind of call South African music. So I was there for that evolution. I saw it happen. I was part and parcel of a lot of it. I flirted and spent a few nights with a couple of genres, but it was always, back to jazz all the time. Yeah.
So in this period of which I would term you getting to know of the music and learning more of it, would you say, or what would you say, what got to you most? Was it the compositions? Did you fancy yourself as playing or being one of them, or was it just the childlike interest in how do they come to this point? How do they come to make this music?
It began as an obsession with the instrumentation itself. You know, I'm always keen to learn new stuff about, instruments. And I played the recorder back at school, and I started taking piano lessons. But the actual playing of the instrument for me wasn't the catch. I think it was how they were telling the stories. They formulated stuff around what was happening in our lives, what the representation of what happens in our lives, and they made music out of that. And if you look at if you listen to people like Bo Kipi Mwekezi, those guys,
Mm.
they played because it was almost like they had a specific struggle that they had to address. And when you look at what struggles was happening during the time, they were being silenced as musicians. They could not perform because they were being black. Some of them had to leave, exile. I'm talking about Satima B. Benjamin, Abdullah Ibrahim, Hugh Masekela, you name them. They had to leave the country because being themselves was not allowed during that regime, and that was the struggle. And what I love was the storytelling behind, how we overcame that struggle. So, of course, my interest was then, how do these records come about? What are they saying? Why are they saying what they're saying? Where does it come from? And who are these people that are creating these records? What are their stories? The story behind the story. That was the biggest thing for me. So of course I gravitated towards that kind of sound, and I gravitated towards the storytelling behind that sound, and that's kind of what informs my day to day. In fact, I often see myself as someone who's constantly telling a story, and then every other day is a different avenue in which we're traveling in. It's a different pace, it's a different kind of energy that we're putting into this day, and this is this story today, and tomorrow is a different story, yesterday was a totally different story. So that's why I gravitated towards this kind of music, because of the storytelling aspect of it, and the richness of and the preservation of who Black South Africa is when we tell those stories. Of course, a lot of people would even say, but no, you guys were influenced by American styles. Yes, we were, because that was the consumerism around the time. We did not have anything that we'd call our own, but we then looked up to the West to kind of gauge the trend or what the world is doing, where the world is going. And today that's completely different. Everybody's looking towards the South. What's the world doing? What's the world saying? Very interesting.
I think this is a good time to actually ask a question that I was meaning to ask. The South African jazz sound. I think back to, you mentioned your Abdullahs and your Hughes. They existed, I'd say, around the same time, but this type of music they were making and the audiences they would get to were, I think, different. We now have we now live in a time where you have your Keenan Mayers, and then you have your Kheti Koti on the other side, and the music, I'd say, is also quite different. But all this is considered to be South African jazz sound. So is there a South African jazz sound? And if there is, what is a South African jazz sound?
I often get into conversations about that specific question purely because people want to push, the thinking around somewhat practitioners, because we call ourselves practitioners in jazz or creators in jazz or whatever the case may be. But the question is, do Americans call their kind of jazz American jazz? Or do they just call it jazz? And the thinking around what I've just asked you now is, why is it that we're creating a box for a specific sound? Because then we're talking marketing strategies, where we're even saying to each other, no, this one is world music. What's world music? Because it was created outside of America. I wrote a piece, some time ago, and my question there was, why is it that we take the stand and call it jazz if it comes from a specific center in New York City, or a specific center in New Orleans, or a stage in Washington, D.C.? We call that jazz. But then we want to take a sound that was created in Cape Town. We want a sound that was created in Johannesburg, something that comes off the stage in Sandton, and we want to call it world music. It's essentially just marketing strategies.
Mm.
But to get back to your question, there is not really a specific sound called South African jazz, but it is all about where it was created and who created it. If it's by South Africans, then the world will say it's South African jazz, and whatever it sounds like. It could be Guma, it could be Kwela, it could be, it could be as far as Afrobeat in Nigeria.
Mm.
The world does not call it South African anything. They just call it world music, and that's exactly that. But we are the ones that are saying, no, this is jazz from. But essentially, music is music. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
So I'm gonna read you a quote. I know you are fond of the quote. So Salif Keita says jazz is the roots to music and every other genres branches that come from that root. So I guess essentially it comes back to that. So it's a jazz sound. It can't be bounded. Am I correct in saying that?
It can't be. It's hence even, a lot of people don't understand jazz because it's a bunch of people in one room who are playing at totally different keys, but together it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's that freedom, that movement of energy that creates the setting for people to come together and play and have people in the audience understanding completely what's happening on stage and everybody just playing their own instrument at that note in unison with each other. It's boundless, it's limitless. It's like it's improv. Duduzo once said when I was when I spoke to him, I had a blog, in fact, that I used to do, and I asked him, you speak very fondly of improvisation, and he says, improvisation is when you let the wind take you where it needs you to be, and essentially that's what jazz is. You kind of flow. You float. You are in the space, and you let the music do the talking. And that's, for me, that's what jazz is. That's what grounds a lot of things. And then you talk about, so this is that specific chord from jazz, and then we pick it up and we put it in an Afro beat. We pick it up and put it in an R&B, a rock beat. 3-4 years ago, I think we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, and that was one of the most groundbreaking albums ever made because he then he decided to throw out the textbook when it comes to how jazz is supposed to be created, and he created jazz according to how he felt like it, he needed to sound, and why is that album groundbreaking? Because he then changed the face of jazz. He started that specific project, influenced rock music for decades to come. It influenced the hip hop world for decades to come. It even introduced or gave birth to new avenues, subgenres within jazz. That spiritual jazz sound that's done, by the likes of the late, Pharoah Sanders, and the sound of Herbie Hancock, and those icons, those legends, that was born from the refacing, if I'm going to call it that, of jazz, and the reinterpretation of Miles Davis through the Bitches Brew project. So it's like air; it just keeps moving.
So basically, jazz is what you make it to be.
It's what you're hearing and how you interpret it. Yeah. And that the same goes for the creators, those that are creating the jazz. What he hears, he kind of, imagines it to sound a specific way, and he hopes that we can hear it too. And but there is no qualms about letting it out there. Let's play, let's play on, and then we'll catch up. Those that have an ear to listen will be able to, of course, hear it and understand where he was going with what chord, and at which point in the song are we taking a turn. Are we who are we letting in next, and that sort of thing.
Okay. So I'm gonna digress a bit. So I asked you to send me 5 songs. You sent 5. You sent 6. Sent 5.
Yeah. Of course.
So
I don't do odd numbers.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Makes sense. Because in my head, I'm like, he probably struggled coming to 5. So I in listening to the 6 songs that you sent, I picked up a bit of a pattern. So, question.
Oh, okay.
What is your favorite part of a song?
Wow. It depends what song it is.
Mm.
It could be the beginning, it could be the middle, it could be the bridge. Some call it the bridge. It could be the crescendo, you know. Each song tells a different story. Each song represents a specific thing about who the writer is, who the performer is, who's part of the ensemble. You know, where did you learn about that song? You know, music has a thing, has for me anyway, and I think this relates to everybody when you kind of think about it. Music has a thing where it kind of takes you to places that you've never been before, you know, and that's where you create memories, and that's where you always go back, you know, to those songs because you want to relive those moments. So it could be any part in the song, you know, that really captures you. But because it has a specific memory attached to it, that's that song. You know, that's that element that keeps you there. That's what keeps you coming back to that song. You know, whether it's, you know, the entire album or it's just two albums from the two songs from that one album, you know, and whichever part of the song it is. You know, a lot of people, I mean, I'm a huge bass fan, you know. So of course I'm a huge bass fan. And those that play bass. I mean, Benjamin Jefta. I'm a fan of Romy Brataseth. I'm a fan. Listen, the list goes on. The list goes on. But apart from the fandom of the one instrument, together, when they come together with the likes of Ayanda Skate, Bondutuzo Makatini, when they come together with Botantin Tuli and Bo Tumi Mukhorosi, it all just makes sense, you know, and a collective. So I don't have a specific part in the song that I'd say I like, but there is something about each composition that speaks to me differently.
I have a concrete answer for you though.
Yeah.
I think Ngwako likes a good intro. Ngwako likes a good intro, and if I could take it a step further, I'd say Ngwako likes a good intro with a piano.
Really? That's very interesting. Very interesting observation. You know, I think a lot of the tracks that we shared definitely are the fronting is the piano. I will say that. Yes. Yes.
I was
Yes.
like, no ways. This is it.
Wow. All right. Interesting observation. I like that.
Anyways, okay. Let's go back to broadcasting.
Yeah.
We can speak about broadcasting a bit. You did what was it called? Trans Africa. You did Trans Africa. You did Rhythm 100, which was online, and now you're at Kofifi. Josie Mawoning as well. So
Yes.
firstly, let's speak more specifically about Rhythm 100 and just the wave of online radio, but just the beyond that, the influence of online spaces in what you do in the current time.
Okay, so we'll talk about the station first, and then we'll talk about, you know,
Because you
the
guys were
impact
and
of the word.
you guys were kind of the ground layers, if we can call it.
Yeah, listen, 2010 was an amazing year, you know. Excuse me. The project started seemingly as a hangout with, you know, the boys at the office on a Friday night, you know, and we weren't the boys. It was just like a bunch of cats that worked together in advertising. You know, and they're like, listen, on Friday nights we hang out, we have drinks at the office because, I mean, you know, the offices and then the advertising scene, the marketing scene, they've got bars. They're very liberal, you know. So they used to hang out at those scenes. And one of them was like, no, man, let's do it next week. And next week became next week, next week became next week. And then all of a sudden, guys, we're playing really dope ass music here. So why is it we don't open up an online radio station, find space, rent space, put in equipment, do this, have these conversations about music, about life, about this and this and another, and then call it a radio station. And of course, they were one of the people that were like, hey, this is online radio, guys. Nobody, like, the inspiration was we can cuss on air.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know, or immediately it's ungovernable, you know. And I think that was also a pulling factor, you know, to create that space, and they did, you know.
And was there any reference? Like, how do you come to the idea of let's start an online radio? How are you aware of the concept of online radio at the time?
It was because I think it was a bunch of people. Okay, so the Friday nights grew from the guys at the office to let's bring some friends. And the
Yeah.
friends, others were DJs, in the house scene, DJ Cleo, da da da. And the
Yeah.
others were, sound engineers that worked at big events. And of course, the conversation was, how can we create something that's going to be exclusively for us? And then let's get some people to listen in. And back in the day, BlackBerry all you needed was $60 and it lasts you data for a month.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you didn't need much, did you?
Mm.
So you'd kind of then have a platform and you've got accessibility, check. You've got the music, check. You've got the people, check. You've got Friday night, double check,
Yeah.
you know it was that easy. And that's how the conversation kind of became, let's start a radio station.
Yeah.
And we'll call it Rhythm 100 Radio. And I remember during the time I had just finished doing a production stint, at YFM, and somebody was like, listen, we have a radio station thing that we're starting up. It's an online thing. Come through Randburg on a Friday night. I'm like, where in Randburg? They're like, nah, come through. It's in Blackberry. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Got there. How people are getting how? All right. This is a radio station. No,
Yeah.
this is how it was born. And then, we went downstairs, and downstairs here's the studio.
Sure.
They're setting up, they're putting up, beams, and I'm like, oh, this is dope. This is really happening. Of course, one Friday night went late to another Friday night to 6 months down the line of Friday nights, and they're like, okay, listen, you've been here long enough. Why is it that you don't get your own show? I'm like, when? It's like, listen, we're going 24 hours now. So
Yeah.
choose a slot and let's do it. I'm like, okay, let me take Saturday morning. They're like, you sure? Great, done. Do you want to come in with somebody? I'm like, yeah, cool, let's do it. And we did it. We kind of created a space where the likes of Bonumuzi Mapena, Mika Stefano Lehasa Muloe, Gladys Mutile from 702,
Mm.
all those people they are the alumni of Rhythm 100 Radio. Yeah.
Oh, and before we continue on the online radios chat, so you mentioned that you had a stint with YFM production. So meaning at this point the radio, or not even the radio, but the broadcasting bug had gotten
It
to you.
it had bit me bad. I mean, I kicked off. My very first radio show was in 2007.
Mm.
And this was at Trans-Africa Radio. And again, it was a Saturday morning thing. I've always had a thing with weekend radio because I think it's more chilled. It tells a different dynamic as opposed to the hustle and bustle of every day, having to be there, having to tell the stories, having to be, on the traffic, on the sports. Listen, yes, the sports are there, but there's something very chilled about weekends that I kind of celebrate,
Yeah.
and of course that meant me creating a setting for a weekend for other people, and I'd often then be like, so what is it that Areh is doing on a Saturday morning?
Mm.
You getting up from last night's clubbing,
Mm.
you in the office, you're doing your shopping, you're doing house cleaning. What's relevant, from
Yeah.
an infotainment perspective in that setting? And that's how I'd create a radio show, relevant to what is happening with the time. So of course you would have then Saturday morning, people are shopping, da 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 da. So the sound would be influenced, the conversation would be influenced by. And then it's Sunday night or Saturday night, which is a show that then I learn how to produce. Was Saturday night. It's a dance show.
Mm.
One of my best friends now, he's late. His name was Tumi Muchikele from Lesotho. He started working at YFM, and he used to have a show called The Beat Eruption.
Mm.
And he was also the programs manager at Trans-Africa Radio. And that's how him and I kind of got together. He's like, listen, where's on Saturday? I'm like, none. He's like, okay, sharp, come through. Let's hang out. And then I'm playing at Far Out. That's where I met the likes of DJ Cleos and all those other people, Miza, and
Yeah.
And me and the boys are gonna hang out at this club called Far Out in Midrand. So after the show, let's head to the club. So literally started as me just waiting for him to finish his show to go to the club. But
Yeah.
I'd sit in studio, and one thing led to another. So we started off we started talking about, oh no, you should actually do this. Let's call that. And he's like, that's it. Produce the show.
Yeah.
Boom. All right. At that time, I wasn't even calling producing. We were like throwing around ideas, guys, to make this cooler. And of course, it clicked. It worked. So by
Good stuff.
then,
Nice.
I was already operating in the calling of I like to do radio, from 2007. And this was like in the 2008, 9 towards, the when he finished in 2009, I think that's when I took the biggest break. There was a year. I've taken several breaks from radio actually, but there was a year, and then Rhythm 100 Radio happened then.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So back to Rhythm 100 and online radio. I'm not sure how current you are with. Actually, do you listen to radio beyond your show and your station?
I do. I have to because remember, we are not operating in silo. There's a whole community of things that are happening around us. I mean, I for one have favorite jazz shows on a Sunday, that I used to listen to, but because now I happen to be on air at the same time that they are on, and now, it gets a bit tricky. It gets a bit tricky,
Yeah.
and it was like that for a while until I was the only one on air during that time currently. So of course there's nobody else to listen to in the morning anymore. But now I've got like late night Sunday when I can catch it, because sometimes, we kind of go missing during the day, and then kind of we wait ends up depends on what we're doing during the day.
Yeah.
If I came straight home, then I'm chilled, nothing happened, then I can listen to, the late night on 9964, the UJX, but different conversation. But yeah. I'm interested in talk radio. I love talk radio.
And your friend now, Dumza as well is on radio now.
Dumza is officially on the radio as well, and he's doing late nights 10 to midnight slot. And, he's also very homely when it comes to that whole thing. In fact, him and I co-produced his first show. I was sitting in this office, and he's like, Mhlobam, Kutuan. I'm like, okay, so what do you think? What do you want? He's like, no, this is that show. This is how they want me to do that show. What do you think? I'm like, okay, do this, do that. Let's do it. And we kind of just went in head first. And his first show was done like that, And I was like, you know what? That's it. Because now you're gonna steal my ideas.
Yeah.
So that's it. He's like, no, so I'm in. This is dope.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, sharp, done.
And it
Run
sounds,
with it.
if I have to say so, it sounds amazing.
He's dope. He's really dope, and his busy schedule is the one that's kind of keeping him on his toes. But I'm glad that he still shows up to the show. Even though after he was performing in Johannesburg, literally 6 hours before he went on air.
Sure.
So we wing it. We wing it.
And why did it take this long? I mean, the voice. Come on.
Whose voice? His voice.
Dumza's voice.
Because he's a musician. He's a musician.
He's a bright.
And I remember the very first time I interviewed him. This was when I had joined Kofifi FM. I think that was 4 years ago, when I didn't even do the jazz slot. He was promoting a single which was like an R&B-ish single, Molo, from his album.
Yeah.
And I had him on the late afternoon, early evening. It was about 5 p.m. He comes in. He's like, this place is so dope. Maybe one day I must come into a show. I'm like, actually, you know what? I'm thinking of going on leave, so maybe you should. But there was a joke that we then kind of kicked off. But we kept in touch, and we've become good friends. And everything that he does, he kind of sweeps through me. He's like, bro, I've got this thing.
Yeah.
I've got this thing. I'm shooting. Come, let's go to Eastern Cape. Let's go shoot this thing. And when I can make it, I can. When I can't, well, I'll play. The end part of it, which is the help you promote it, which is what happened with his live concert, because I couldn't be at the taping of that. It was in the Eastern Cape somewhere, but he gave me the footage before it even got onto the proper, DVD. Like, listen, for social media, let's talk about it.
Going back to the online radio, I keep going back. Online radio, I wanted to lead us to online versus traditional now, because we see this new market of podcasts and online stations, and which allow you accessibility at any point. Then we still have you guys who firmly have an audience, but are often under some sort of criticism in terms of the way the content is being delivered and so forth. So what are your views on that, and what's your view overall on the surge of online platforms?
I'll start with the online. I'll start at the end and go to the beginning. Online platforms came about because then there was a real struggle. ICASA had blocked any new applications for whether your community, whether you're PBC, whether you are commercial, whatever, they weren't taking any more radio stations onto the spectrum because the spectrum was completely depleted, and people had, the means to fund projects where they create spaces. I mean, I remember when the likes of Gareth Cliff showed up with his platform, quickly followed by Touch, Tivo Touch, and then there was that person, and there was that person, and there were these people, and because it's so easy. All you really need is the right equipment and a good internet connection, and there you have it. You broadcasting, and from an audience perspective, that is still quite a little bit struggling because not everybody has a great data plan or a Wi-Fi plan that sits constantly feeding Wi-Fi internet into your house or whatever, So it's very limited, and that's exactly why it kind of just it peaked and then it slowed down completely.
Yeah.
Because BlackBerry took their stuff and went. The $60 a month where you got data the whole month, that wasn't cutting it anymore. It was bad for business, And more people were buying BlackBerries because of that convenience. And, so it was great, but the networks were losing out. So when that started to phase out, online radio became, if I've got data, I'll tune in. And I think if I've got data, I'll tune in also means that you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of made me leave that space, to be honest with you, because this was around the Rhythm 100 radio passed into Josie Maboneng radio, the dawn of Maboneng, when Maboneng became, what it was. We were amongst the very few businesses there that kind of boomed. And because it is such a cool neighborhood to be in, or was, or still is, I'm not sure. I haven't been there in years, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got the coolest restaurants, you've got the coolest, places to hang out, you've got museums, you've got art, fashion, street art, you've got different, conversations happening. A radio station makes sense, right? So of course that was the one other pull that happened. But when the movement of data started becoming a bit of a personal thing now, when like, I don't have data, so I'm not gonna listen. You started to see how the numbers online started to dwindle.
Yeah.
You'd show up and you'd be like, I feel like I'm talking alone here today. And you've got the best playlist in the world. Right? You've prepped for this game, yet you feel like nobody's there. And I personally started feeling that way. And I'm like, I think it's time we went back traditional radio, because at least then you've got that tangible listenership. It's almost as if you can hold and touch and feel the listenership. And yes, they're getting a lot of flack because then with everybody now mushrooming a radio station, traditional FM signals or frequencies then were under pressure.
Yeah.
They kind of from my bird's eye view, they kind of started losing that it factor, that coolness. And how do we remedy something that's kind of failing or falling, from inverted commas grace? You put in people that are trending. You employ people that have numbers with their personal following, with the aim to boost, brand recognition again, of course, to drive back their listeners, because now they're no longer listening to just somebody who was made famous by the radio. They're listening to someone who is living in Stain City, flying to New York to go broadcast from New York, flying to this and having a clothing brand and having an alcoholic brand and having numbers on social media. That then became, the actual business plan for a lot of comebacks, for the lot of radio stations, which worked. I think it really did work,
To an extent.
To an extent, because then the actual craft of creating radio then diminished.
Yeah.
It was all about a talking head and a famous sidekick and where they went this weekend, where they're going next weekend, how cool is so and so on stage. And the listener wasn't there. So how are you talking to me about things that were not there? At least give me some context. If it is going to be about the next gig, tell me about this gig. Why should I go to this gig? Who's going to be there? Let them come in and talk to you about why they want to be there, and let it be a conversation that is bigger with all of us as opposed to just one-sided and listening to so and so talk about how dope it was and that song that so and so dropped, but you're not even about to play that song. Like, where are we going with this?
Mm.
So it quickly became that talking heads about things that are irrelevant, that are not current, and losing the listenership. And people then started to then say, I'm not gonna listen to that show. Let me play my CD,
Yeah.
and or let me stream Apple Music, because CDs have also kind of done, they've died a slow death, with music stores closing and stuff like that. Nobody's getting it. People are selling CDs out of their cars
Mm.
because,
Mm.
and that's where the flag is with traditional radio, because then they started on a different formula altogether, and they don't know how to come back because the people have stopped listening. It's scary, that we get up every Sunday. Well, I get up every Sunday and I be a part of what happens on the broadcasting spectrum, and I switch off my microphone and I switch on other people's and I listen to what happens there. Scary. It's scary.
Which
And
I was about to say, which brings me back to you, because you studied this. You have your qualifications in what you do. So do you think that is as important in being able to manage that content offering?
um yes and no. Um yes, you need to know what you're doing, and
Yeah.
that's the qualifications part of it. That's the how do you create a radio show that's worthy of being called a radio show, you
Mm.
know. But there's also that passion that everybody kind of never has, especially on commercial radio. It's all about the cool factor, And maybe I learned radio differently, and I always keep referring to this. I learned radio differently. My mentors were not the likes of the DJ Freshers and the it factor, the coolness, the DJs, the clubs, the tours. That wasn't how I created the how I was taught to create radio. I was taught to create a space where there is an opportunity to teach someone something,
Mm.
and it was also an opportunity to share what you know about specific things. It doesn't matter what format it is, whether it's talk, whether it's music. Your responsibility as a broadcaster is of such a high impact nature
Yeah.
that everyone that listens to your show needs to kind of take something from it. you know it doesn't matter whether you've got a voice or not for the radio. It doesn't matter whether your songs are work or not. But if you know what you're talking about, that's a place to start. Because then already immediately, you coming in there, and someone is bound to hear, like, no man, Ari's talking about something here. Hold on, let me just listen to this.
Yeah.
And you're delivering something that they're interested in. That's how I kind of, when all of this madness of public radio was happening, I had to go back to the books. I had to go back to, John Coltrane says you must go back to one source.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, but I love jazz, guys. And my mentor during the time was Mampranda Sisan, and she's like, you don't need to come and work on my show. You ready for your own show? Just do it.
Yeah.
It's time. And this is after Upo Mabena had just passed, and me having spent time with him before. He, not a lot of people know this, he had the Bob Mabela School of Radio that he did. So we'd all come in on a Saturday and we'd hang out, and there'd be drinks, there'd be food, and there'd be presentations. There'd be his industry friends, the likes of Fresh would be there, and we'd all kind of engage on a more intellectual level when it comes to what radio is and what radio should sound.
Broadcasters. These are not your normal anybody's. These are proper broadcasters you let.
Yeah, like people that actually know the craft.
Yeah.
And we'd sit through those sessions, and he'd be like, listen, guys, this is not rocket science. And there's a lot of things that we would bash in these sessions, which I don't think I want to mention, through this recording, but
Yeah.
I'll mention them to you some other day when we're not being recorded. But we would make living examples of, no, this is not what you do. This is what you do. That thing on that show, that's not working. That's not working. This is working. They should have at least, So these were those moments where you get to, you get to get the feel of how to create from someone who then goes back on Monday morning to create, you know. So that said, I went back to one source, John Coltrane. And I said, well, I've got jazz, right? And I've got the radio, got the journalism thing. Um, how about I create a jazz show that I would love to listen to, you know? And I went back and forth with the management at Kofifi FM because they could not fathom the idea of a 3-hour jazz show like Utlo Buagaing for 3 hours.
Yeah.
What the hell? And they had literally put it somewhere between 11 and 1 on a Sunday. And it was 11 and 1 on a Sunday, I think. And I quit the afternoon thing. I'm like, no, listen, my day's done here. I cannot still be hanging out with mates and then at like 4, I must rush here to come and do this. This is not working for me. And fortunately, the management was like, listen, brother, we get it. Let's try it out. And we did. And they tried it out. It was 2 hours. It was 2 hours. It was 2 hours. I'm like, nah, gents, this is not enough. Can I get some leg room? And I had to campaign for the leg room. But by the time I campaigned for the leg room, I had already won Best Jazz Radio the first year. So they're like, no, listen, by all means,
See
So
what vision is.
and then that's exactly how the K-Jazz show kind of then took shape. And then during the time was still, with co-host and a producer and but then when you're working with people as part of the bigger radio show, for me it's very hard because then you've got all the other peoples to consider. And if you're presenting something as delicate and as complex as jazz, you cannot be having other opinions in the studio while you're trying to teach someone something or impart some sort of information. So, of course, I kind of campaigned for them to leave. They got their own slots somewhere, at the station, and it really was great. And of course, I was stuck with the 3 hours alone. And that's when I was like, aha, there's a blank canvas. This is exactly what I've been waiting for. This is exactly where I should be, And for the latter part of the 4 years, this is exactly what I've been doing. Every week.
So, I know you're a vinyl collector, so I want to show you a few of the ones that I have. Well, at least here, the others in Detroit. I have my Billy Joel, The Stranger. This is me trying to be a cool kid, collecting vinyl.
Interesting.
This Smokey Robinson, Blame It on Love.
Smooth. All right. Let's cruise. All right.
I have your Nina Simone as well. My Baby Just Cares.
Oh, My Baby Just Cares for Me. Love that record. I think that was one of I think for me, Nina Simone's records have always been, they have a knee-jerk effect, to anyone who's listening to them. It's either you're politically inclined or you don't know what the hell she's cackling on about, and therefore you're switching off. And the politically inclined, they get it because she gets in, she's like, where's my money? And you're like, yo, actually.
Very direct.
Where's my money, dog? It's that kind of mood. I am sitting next to my collection. There's a few ones that don't have covers, I'm not sure why. And it's like those blue note ones. So they sit in a blue plastic bag.
Do you know how many you have? I know you
About 250.
Thank you.
Yeah. 250. These are the new ones. These are the new ones that have just arrived. This is Kyle Shepherd, right? Solo piano. I had to refind this one. This is a gem, right? I had to refind this one.
This is just today.
Yeah. This one, of course, everybody knows that one. I had to find that one. This is Project Elo to me. The first to me.
Okay.
And then this one. This one. This is the love of my life. I love this project. But
so where do you actually get your vinyl?
It depends. There's people like Afro Synth that actually send people notices and some listen, guy, can I lead vinyl? Do you want to buy? And usually when you go and buy from like an Afro synth or whatever, you don't show up there and you buy one, you like buy 10.
Yeah.
And then it's 3,500 rand later, and you're like, oh snap.
And
Anyway, bring much in.
so does this stand back to Mogolo, like your granddad and his love?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he bought 3 or 4 every weekend. I'm actually quite slow on the uptake,
Uh,
but it's also because they're so expensive now, you know. And a lot of them are there are reissues because I mean, I get them from Matsuli Music. Matsuli Music is a record label that does reprints,
yeah.
and we also get them from Ashams. Ashams ke label ele ya bo Sisonke Konti, and they do a lot of reprints as well. So you literally just go online and you hit them up. But then one thing I love about all of those people that I've mentioned, Matsuli and Ashams, they've
Mm,
got them on Bandcamp. So
mm,
you can actually listen to them without necessarily owning them,
yeah.
you know. But these are all old reprints, like classical South African stuff that you can never get anywhere in South Africa. Anyway, like they'd get them literally, if it's not a reprint, the original is sitting in Europe somewhere in a dusty room
Yeah.
and it's just in a bad condition. You know, that's how rare they are.
And so did you or do you have any access to your granddad's collection if it's still
He
exists?
has, he fortunately for me, you know, when he passed, these are one of the things that he said I should take before he passed. It's like, listen, those are my records. I haven't listened to them in over 10 years, bro.
Uh,
Take that. I'm like, nah, dude, for real. He's like, just take this,
oh,
you know. And I think there were about 90 of them when I took them. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah. But of course, over the years, I'd been listening to them with him. So I knew exactly where he was
yeah.
that and what's on there and all of that. So coupled with mine, it's about 200 and something odd somewhere.
That's
And
true.
growing.
That's
And
true.
growing. And growing.
So
Yeah. Definitely a treasure. One day
let's speak.
sorry, you
Oh,
can
no,
go.
no. Let's speak about the current wave, the current jazz,
Yeah.
specifically in the country. You know, you have
Yeah.
your SN projects, your Nketis, your Mallories, your
Right.
um Moses. What's Moses' surname?
Speak of the devil, she'll appear. Yeah.
Devil. Moses Sibula. You have your
Yes. Yes.
Risangs, Shelles, your Bokangs, and so forth.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the current crop of jazz acts that we have in the country? And who are you listening to?
Phenomenal. They are phenomenal. I'm listening currently to Tandinduli's Children of Meruwe,
Oh,
Black Elijah, Children of Meruwe. I'm listening to, there's a specific track there. Love that. It's perfect for my drives in the morning. I'm also listening to Makaya McCraven. That's the new project from he's a percussionist, from the UK. Love that sound. I'm listening to a lot of old music. I recently found, in fact, I think 2 months ago, I did a thing on the show, a record label called Impulse Records,
mm,
right? Impulse Records was a record label that kind of brought out for the very first time as a solo act, John Coltrane,
oh,
and within that record label, there are hundreds of artists,
mm,
so of course I found that playlist somewhere and I'm listening to that, and it's a lot of music.
mm.
Gato Barbieri, Alice Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders. Listen, everybody's on that compilation. It's called the Impulse Records.
And it's all new.
Hey,
And it's all new to you as you listen to the sounds.
it's all new to me. Listen, like, and it's old music. Like, it's really
Mm,
like 40s, 50s, 60s music. But for me, it's a brand new vibe. And I think that's also what kind of inspires what happens on the show because I've always been fearless in the attempt to create, to create a space where jazz can be catered for as a whole. And because the station doesn't have any other jazz offering but this show, you know, I'm forced to cater to a
oh,
wide spectrum within jazz in the 3 hours,
mm.
So going back, I know I'm gonna put this in the 1 hour, I'm gonna put this in the other hour, I'm gonna put this in the other hour. Listen, it's gonna be one hell of a fusion. But those that know how to follow and listen to jazz will actually understand. I've even had some jazz writer, even one day she texted me, she's like, now I get your show. I wasn't sure what was going on. I'm like,
Yeah.
there is literally no other jazz offering at that station. So I need to make do with the 3 hours of God so that I can cater to every single one. Whoever's listening needs to kind of feel like they belong, because there's a certain element within the jazz space that kind of touch them. The post bop, the pre bop, the swing, the avant garde, the improv, contemporary South Africa. That's what you're asking me about. They need representation.
Yeah.
I mean, Songbook number 2 is another new one that I'm listening to. It's coming out in November. We've got a couple of tracks that we're playing. It's amazing. Morera Shongwisa from Mozambique has a new album. He's sharing the new single with me. He shared it this afternoon, in fact. So because I'm on my hiatus this week, I will not be on the show, which is great, which means I don't have to prep anything this week. I can just chill, right? Somebody else is doing the show, which is great. They can deal with whatever music they want to play, but it's already on the system anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of new stuff that I'm listening to, as well as much as the old stuff. I'm also sort of zoning in on the Joy of Jazz thing. Now that we're in October, headed to Joy of Jazz, the conversation is going to be intensely Joy of Jazz.
Okay.
Not necessarily on the show, because I think there is something called overshare, where you kill the story, and having to talk about the same thing every week it's long, it's laborious, it's frustrating, so we don't do that. But closer to the time, we'll then have the 1 or 2 acts that'll be like, okay, so you're gonna be doing this on that stage, let's entice it one more time. But that's essentially what's going to be happening. However, I'm working around the music. I mean, I'm sitting here with the entire lineup. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. This is the entire lineup, and from this I can choose anybody. Like, okay, so let me talk to so and so,
Yeah.
and then we get the PR company to organize it, and we focus and we highlight that, So those are the conversations going back when I go back next week. I'm also trying to kind of palette cleanse during this time where I'm not doing jazz radio. So I'm listening to a lot of 90s R&B. I don't subscribe to a lot of house music. I love deep house, but that's as good as it gets. Don't ask me about my piano. No,
You're not for that.
never been. I don't get it. It's like bomb. I never got it. It missed me. It missed me literally. I was like, oh, okay. Oh, is this gum? Oh, okay. Cool.
They speak of a quieter infusion. Yeah, I get it.
Ah, over
So
the head.
Prep. So you mentioned that you have a week off, so you won't have to do prep for your show. How intense does that get? And do you think the intensity is due to you as a person, or it's just the nature of radio prep?
Definitely me as a person. I prep for the KJS show. Literally a week will go and I'll be prepping for a whole week, and this is just literally for the 3 hours, 180 minutes, and then it's done.
Yeah.
A whole week's work. And then on Sunday, I come back, I come home, I put the laptops down, I chill for the rest of the day, and I take Monday off.
And
But Monday,
yeah.
I don't touch my laptop on Monday, and I then start all over again on Tuesday. But already throughout the period of Sunday, heading into Monday, heading into Tuesday, there's already songs that I'm playing in the car. There's already stuff that I'm messing around on Apple Music with. I'm reading up on that. I'm reading up on this because I think this is a very interesting conversation. In fact, this past week, Brenda Susani sent me something. Some artists. Hold on, I'll tell you who they are now. His name is Yosef Gutman. He's a South African Israeli, and he's I don't know, his sound is not necessarily pure jazz, but he's more of that transcendental music. There's a lot of harps, there's a lot of soft instrumentation. I thought this is interesting. because then this is a different side of jazz that we never really tell. We do tell with one or two songs, maybe you're listening to like your Sun in September,
Yeah.
which is Matthew Halsall. But this is more softer than that. So that's a very interesting, it's an uncomfortable zone for me. So I definitely want to sink into that because people then assume, oh no, you're gonna play as Dizzy Gillespie the whole 3 hours. Listen, I'd be fired because what are you doing? People could play that CD. You don't have to play this guy's music for the next. So that's it. It's definitely me. I am a bit OCD when it comes to that.
Yeah.
It will take me a week sometimes. Sometimes it'll take me 2 days, but intense 2 days where I don't go anywhere. I don't see anyone. I sit in this office and I do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this might be such a open question to ask, but are you happy at Kofifi and with what you are doing?
I am.
Yeah.
I am. Yes, because I'm at a place where I'm given 100% creative direction. I decide what goes on air, how it goes on air, and why it should go on air. A lot of the shows don't get to do that. A lot of radio stations don't do that. They'd be like, no, you're gonna play what we give you. You say you're a jazz presenter, great, present jazz. Don't create a jazz show. They'll give you a platform and they'll give you hoops and bumps and stuff to get through. And the management of the station have not done that. Like at no point am I sitting here thinking, oh gosh, maybe somewhere else, maybe somewhere. In fact, a lot of people have left a lot of interesting radio stations to come to Kofifi because, there's a lot of creative movement there, and as long as you deliver within, like, color within the lines, that's all we're trying to say, but how you color and what colors you use, that's a different story, and yeah, and that's how you create a space for you and create a space that people will resonate with, from that perspective. I mean, if we had to tally about the radio stations that people, I mean, I don't know if you're privy to some of the groups, a lot of jazz groups, like appreciation groups, live on the Facebook platform. If you look at the different presenters that do shows at different radio stations, there's a specific format that they follow. They'll have 4 tracks from this guy, 4 tracks from that band, 5 tracks from this one, and then they'll call this other section in that show home brew or whatever. And then they'll have like a selection of 5 super hot sticks, mabuse, and all of that. For me, that's very one-dimensional. You did not learn anything about a lot of things after listening to a show like that because all you did was listen to the best of for 2 hours.
Yeah.
The best of Areh, the best of Ngwako, the best of Areh for 2 hours, and then 3 hours in some instances, and you're done, and then that's supposedly jazz done for the day, and you're like, Mara.
Essentially, jazz nostalgia. That's
Listen, like shoot yourself in the head kind of nostalgia. Like, oh God, are we here again?
Yeah.
But I don't like that. I'd hate for me to listen to something like that because it means that there's no effort put into this thing. And maybe that also goes back to, my bass training, with the Brendas and the Bobs and whoever. Like, create content that you would listen to.
True.
Who
would you love to have on your show who you are yet to have?
That's an unfair question. I don't know. I've had so many people.
Well, you could go international as well. Who would you love to have on?
Oh, actually, I was talking to the manager of an ensemble called the Bali Maya Project. Yeah, I'm still work in progress. And the other day, I had a conversation. But now, man, I'm gonna jinx it now. I'm not sure if I should tell you. I'm gonna jinx it. I'm gonna jinx it. I was supposed to have a conversation. I think this is as we wrapped up Heritage Month with 2 major artists, right? But the one he pulled out because his manager was like, "No, we're not doing interviews." Da da da. But Dwight Tribble said he wanted to be on the show. So I'm like, oh snap! All right, so let's talk about it. So we've been talking.
On the show.
Yeah. He's like, listen, I'd love to do that, because in fact, he was looking at the playlist because I always tag them on the playlist when I'm playing the music. He's like, oh my God, do you want me to send you some money? Thank you for playing my music. I'm like,
Okay.
because then I'd get fired for taking your money. But let's talk about you being on the show. He's like, that's even better. I'd love that.
Yeah.
When can you put me on? I'm like, okay, let's head to your WhatsApp, sir. And we head up to the WhatsApp, and then he never really checks his WhatsApp, Shem.
Yeah.
He's
That's
there for 5 minutes, and then his phone's off for the next 2 weeks.
wow.
So I don't know what's happened to that conversation, but it would have been amazing, to be able to, spend time with Dwight Tribble. It's crazy. It's amazing. So that's that conversation that I'd love to still have. From a local front, I've kind of spoken to everybody. I've kind of exhausted everything. Um,
Well,
and
would you bring back someone who maybe
we do, like, because they're constantly evolving as artists, and every season there's a new album. There's a reason for them to come back. I think that's what keeps the show going, because there's a platform for you to come back and showcase the next project, and the next conversation. And what I've done is that I've actually moved from just being a jazz show to a jazz lifestyle show. So we're incorporating a lot of events now, events in art, events in literature, events in live music, that is otherwise not jazz related. I mean, this one that's coming up on Saturday, the folklore, Yapilani Bubu, it involves the likes of Nikki B, and Nikki B was on the show this past Sunday, and she doesn't do radio interviews. I was like, oh my God, you serious? She's like, yeah, put me on the show, man. So I was like, oh, cool, that's dope. We also focusing on stuff that's culturally relevant to the modern day South African. People have decided through COVID that they're not going to stay home anymore, and when they find themselves listening to a certain radio station, it's always about something weird. Ask a guy, So no, let them ask, guys. We'll do, cultural work. We'll walk where our would be living ancestors have and are currently walking. There's a lot of storytelling that still needs to happen about the old jazz. The guys that went to exile, they are the prominent ones. And then you've got the Enzas, the guys that really stayed. I'm reading, actually, I finished the one. This is the volume I want to show you. There's this book. This is a really dope book, right?
Okay.
It talks about the artists, the artists that stayed in South Africa during the exile period. They call them exiles. So you've got all these people that stayed home, and they used to perform behind curtains, at these shows as pseudos, and these are the stories that you want to follow up on, because so what's happened to you? Where's your music? And a lot of our music is not available here. You can never find original South African music here because it wasn't made by South Africans. It was made by Europeans, who then found you as an artist or as a talent, recorded you, and took the masters home, and made reprints of everything, made millions from you, and your family and your legacy knows nothing about that. So those are the stories that I want to uncover. Those are the stories that we should tell, because then that gives those that are currently still living, like the likes of Bab Mahlang, Bo Prince Lengwasa, and all those guys that are still alive, it gives them a bit of pride, to say, at least in my last days, or with my last walk with jazz, there was a moment where I actually made the news, or I mattered to someone or to some people, and I'm getting shows, I'm getting booked, I'm getting, this is why we do what we do. We don't do it because we want to ask a guy. No, that's irrelevant, insignificant, actually. This is why we're here, to tell the South African story.
And this is why I admire people such as, I think, to me personally, biggest superstar in my eyes, is Siphiwe Mhlambi. To me, that is the greatest, or one of the greatest South Africans, because the work he does is to document.
Without fail.
And he's the guy who's always there to witness all those moments, which we consider to be moments in time in the history of our country. So
He's
To
a bit of a
me,
wizard because he stops time.
he literally stops time,
Yeah, he's a wizard.
captures it, and he puts it into this wonderful.
Capsule.
It's
Preserved forever. You should definitely check out one of his shows. Him and I were talking about his new concept. He's because he's done so many showcases. I kind of twisted his arm a little bit. I'm like, Madam Mhlambi. We were at the show to watch Andile Yanana one of the days.
yeah.
No, not Andile Yanana. Fayafaku. We were in Braamfontein for a Fayafaku show. And I'm like, Madam Mhlambi, when are we gonna get a coffee table book? Imagine a coffee table book that has all those images, right? And people can buy it for like 1,005 and you keep it and you put it on the coffee table and it's like, wow, the collection is pure Mhlambi. I own it now, something of that nature. That's where he should be going, And I'm like, do that, Chief. Stop this thing of these shows.
Even beyond that, I would just love a biopic or a book on him and his life and his journey.
Oh my God, we did
That would
something like
be
that.
incredible.
I'm yet to find that recording at the station. We did something like that when he was on the show, and he tells a very interesting story of his life, through jazz, of course, where he found music. But his upbringing was one of the toughest. He tells the story of how he didn't even have shoes for school. He'd be bullied, by these kids. And listen, a very touching story. But that would definitely get into a book. I'd love to read about that.
I would be all over that.
Oh man, that's an idea. I must pitch it to Mhlambi. Actually,
You must pitch it to him. You must say,
like, yo, Joe, can't wala ning buka. But his response would probably be like, "Man, I'm not ready. My life is not over yet, so I'm not ready for that."
But we need that. And I feel that it's quite ironic that his story hasn't been documented and he's been responsible
documenting.
It's quite.
It's quite. I mean, I think it's quite hard to write stories about yourself. I was thinking about something this morning. In fact, Jorge, my birthday's coming up on Saturday, and of course, I've been in reflect mode all week, and it's quite hard to pen or to put into words the journey from a certain point in your life to date, because so much has happened.
Yeah.
And if you're going to sit down and tell someone the story, there's so many details that you're going to leave out because some things aren't necessarily newsworthy. Some things are just like, blip, and then you moved on. But those are the things that are important to the stories. Those are the things that are meant to come out and inspire other people and give people, a sense of normalcy. Because we as much as we say we are all together, we live in silos. In your mind, that's you, and survival mode is you, chilled mode is you. If you're with other people, that's a buffer. But even when you're in a room full of people, you're still in your head.
It's all you.
It's all you. So it's very interesting. When I reflect, I'm like, no. Hence, I feel like he'll probably be like, I don't think I'm ready for a book. My life is not over. Maybe in 70, when I'm 70, then we can talk about a book. Because now
we're not gonna wait that long because he can't document his own stories, but someone definitely can, and that someone could be you. So
that'll be interesting. I'd love to write a foreword because I know him now. I understand. I don't completely understand some of the challenges that he faces because we all have different, but I get him, and I get his standpoint. I get his view on things. I mean, he's also quite a celebrant of the work that I do. He's like, I love what you do. This is amazing. You are showing the world, and I'm like, no, you're showing the world that jazz in South Africa exists. I'm merely just recreating a space for people to appreciate it more. And tomorrow it could be easily taken away like this. So we do what we do with what we have right now.
Yeah.
I
think in sort of concluding our chat, let's talk a bit about you and, well, firstly, if you believe in the concept of a purpose, and if so, what is your relation with it? Do you think you found it? Do you think you're working towards it? And do you think you know what it is?
Purpose I feel like we'd never really find our purpose, but we find the energy to be consistent in what we do, and that ultimately becomes your purpose. You know, you often find people talking about, yeah, I don't know why I'm here. I am almost 40.
Mm.
And I'm like, Mara, all right. I was fortunate enough to kind of have a bug. Some call it a bug, but I feel like it's not a bug. It's a calling, to be able to do things, and 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 when you do them with such utmost honesty,
Mm.
the universe kind of reveals it for you, and everything is easy. And this is going back to the original. I feel like I deserve to be on radio days. I mean, I used to have, my parents used to have like they call them ghetto blasters. I don't know why they were calling them ghetto blasters those days. Anyway, they had this radio, right? And it had a record function on it. So of course I'd take my dad's old tapes, the one that looks the most run down
Yeah.
because don't think he remembers the
I
songs still around.
uh,
Anyway, so I'd grab that and I'd record myself and I'd do links and I'd listen back. I'd be like, yo, that was dope. Maybe do that again. And then there was the incorporation of music in my head. I'm like, so that's what it is. I did that. And this was already in high school, grade eight. In fact, before grade eight, I was already kind of, drifting towards this purpose, this thing. So to say I found it or I'm finding it, it was always there. It wasn't for me to find. It was just always there, but it kind of grew wings through the repetitive the repetition and the
mm.
repetitiveness of me consciously, paying attention to the thought as it comes up.
Mm.
Oh, snap. Oh, yes. Oh, there's that. And then, of course, I was then interested in the other people that did it. I'd find the likes of Lawrence Dube, Treasure Shabalala, old guys, Womesh Mapetla. I mean, we grew up without TVs at some point, and the radio was the only thing that really kind of made sense, and we used to listen to Metro FM or Radio Metro during the time. And it was late on a Sunday, and they'd play all these jams, and I'd love how these guys are announcing these songs, and they'd be so smooth, like Jens he any puza, you guys, why y'all so smooth about this? Like, what's going on? How did you even get into the radio? Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So of course, growing up, you kind of put one and one together. The smoothness, it was just the finessing, how people kind of talk. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
You sound sexy, you're selling music,
Mm.
but the knowledge is the research. People kind of put work into it. Like, if I'm going to talk to you about jazz, God as hell, I've been researching this thing for over 24 hours. There is no way I'm lying to you.
Mm.
Then you get then those that kind of mouth off on the radio and they sound cool because it's a cool factor. Yeah, well, gimmicks is fantastic, but the crux of it all is that it's more a calling than it is finding a path to you know and doctors will tell you, no, nah, I was so interested in why I had blood in my veins, and this is at an early age. Like, so how does that whole thing work? So by then you kind of figure out, hold on, no, man, this is my actual path.
Yeah.
This is my actual calling, or this is my actual purpose. Because if you can't stop thinking about it, if you go a day without thinking of, if you can't go a day without thinking about it, then you know exactly what you're supposed to do. And that's why I find people that be like, no, I'm still trying to find myself. Where you gonna find yourself? Where? You can go.
So it's not like something placed out there that you
No,
you
it's not
reach.
as a treasure hunt where you find a plaque. Here I am. Earlier on, speaking of which, I was with the kids at the movies and we were watching the rise of Gru, the Minions, and they had this green plaque, and this was the big thing. And I'm like, these are just the fairy tales that people tell. But in this conversation, they were going to go find this plaque. This is supposed to give them superpowers. There isn't something like that in real life. Nothing gives you superpowers. You've got everything you need, actually. you know.
So this is probably the last thing I'm gonna ask before I
Yeah.
give you your flowers. Um,
It's flowers.
what matters most to you now, or in the space you find yourself
Family,
in?
health, um, inner peace.
Mm.
Inner peace is something I'm learning.
Yeah.
Um, being so consistent in trying to do amazing, be amazing, we lose ourselves because we find, you know, I think maybe it's just a personal thing, but as you're on the come up, uh, you are either going to swallow your pride and knock on the relevant doors, or you're going to sit back and have one opportunity that you're probably going to mess up and then hate everything about everyone and have an opinion about who people are for the rest of your life, because you've got this pride thing now, yeah, angeke bangitshele ngoba vele bangivalela ngaphandle, there's people that walk around with stuff like that in their hearts, and it's not from a lack of not trying to be somebody, but from being discouraged by people who are around you, our peers, people that we kind of spend time around don't necessarily have a positive effect on you.
Mm.
And once you're able to identify the tribe, and then everything else kind of just lays itself out. And when you're on the move to, realizing what you've always wanted to be, or who you always wanted to be as a human within this calling, within this dream that you have, a lot of people will kind of come take shots at you, which is something that has happened, several times in my lifetime anyway,
Yeah.
And it creates a jaded version of you, where you don't want to be hanging out with people. You've got this one is you're not friends with this one because that one is not friends with that one. You get into other people's issues, and one day you kind of step back and you realize, well, actually, who am I here? And why have I become this person? Because this is not what you started out to do, right? You didn't join industries to hate people, to be in competition. Yeah, who's going to launch the song first and all of that? You get into all those kind of politics with the artists themselves, there's the faction and there's the cliques, and you're all part of that because you believe that it's an industry. It's not, it's just people, and you're just caught up in it.
Yeah.
So inner peace is when you break out of that, and you look at what matters to you, who matters to you,
Mm.
and are they here for the decades, or are they here like the seasons? you know um doesn't matter. You still have you you know and that's the inner peace that I'm talking about, where I'm able to just sit in this room and listen to jazz. As long as I've got my vibes, I've got my books, I've got my cell phone, I can talk to whoever I want to talk to whenever the need arises, whatever.
Yeah.
But
You're okay with yourself.
I'm happy.
Mm.
I can get out here, I can hug my family, I can go to bed, and tomorrow we do it all over again. There is no beef with nobody. I'm not stuck in conversations about, no, not gonna hang out with so and so.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk to so and so. I've also, pulled out from investing in friendships because then you're forced to think as a collective, when you're within the friendships, especially with the groups kind of friendships, you're forced to think as collectives. And when it's time for you to think out of the box by yourself, you're a bit of a weirdo. Like, why
Right.
are you not? Why are you not? You're a bit of a weirdo to everybody, and why are you not like us or talking to us?
I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Or doing what we're doing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
man. I think I'm really grateful. I really appreciate you agreeing to do this. You don't understand. For me, this is still very cool. Talking to Ngwako, it's
Yeah.
really cool. So I really appreciate you
Thank you,
taking
brother.
taking some time out to have this chat with me. I really appreciate it, and I am a big fan of what you do. I heard you trying to play it humble there when you said Tiwa is the big guy. You are for me close to that bracket. I'm a avid listener of radio, and it was by chance that I came across your show, and I've been listening ever since. So I really
Oh,
appreciate the work you do. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you um taking this time to do this with me. And yeah, let's see where this takes us. And hopefully it'll be a really cool episode where everyone will get to hear some of your stories and more of you.
thank you. Thank you so much. Areh, we don't often pause,
Mm,
to acknowledge the impact. And you did that for me today. For me, it's always about Sunday.
mm,
What are you talking about? Whose life are you changing? Which artist are you profiling? And how is that going to positively influence their record sales? Are they going to get booked for shows through that platform? So those are the things that kind of occupy my head space
mm,
throughout, a lot of these shows and a lot of these weeks that we spend going on air and harping on about jazz as if nothing else matters and nothing else should matter anyway. So thank you for allowing me to pause and reflect. I did mention that, as I head to my birthday on Saturday, I'm very reflective this week.
yeah,
So this came just on time. I'm also looking at the next, phase of things,
mm,
and this is what I was saying to a good friend of mine yesterday, that it's no longer about the award shows. Yeah, got the T-shirt,
yeah,
but the real work in jazz, the real work in music, is just beginning.
mm,
With the advent of, I think we've energized the industry again. As much as people talk about jazz is dying, we've energized the industry. And energizing the industry also means that there are people that are officially paying attention to, what the music is saying to the people and how is it being delivered. And we play a key role into that how is it delivered thing, because there's no CD stores to sell CDs anymore. So it's important that we sit here and be like, okay, so there's a new there's a new project.
yeah,
What do you want to say?
yeah,
How do you want us to say it?
mm,
And where do you want to perform? Let's make that happen. We are so busy with all of that that we
mm,
don't stop, and we recognize that we've actually created beasts,
mm,
of
yeah.
no return by virtue of just wanting to make other people's lives better. So thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate this being the very first the inductee.